My parents bought my sister a house, then slid the mortgage papers across the table to me. You've saved enough. It's time to help the family. I said no. So they sued me for $350K, and in court, the judge asked one question that changed everything. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine the people who raised me, my own flesh and blood, would drag me into a courtroom. We were the quintessential American family, the kind other kids envied, sun-drenched Sunday dinners, laughter echoing through summer camping trips, a real-life Norman Rockwell painting. Howard and Catherine, my parents, instilled in us the sacred creed, family first, blood thicker than water, an unbreakable bond of mutual protection. Oh, how those words, once a comfort, would twist into a weapon against me when I turned 32, when they decided my bank account suddenly belonged to everyone. My sister, Bridget, for years my senior, chose a different path. She married young, children followed swiftly, and her 20s dissolved into a blur of part-time jobs while her husband, Kyle, built a life in construction. They weren't destitute, no, but they navigated life paycheck to paycheck, their 3 children, Mia, Owen, and little Theo, squeezed into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. I, however, charted a solitary course. My 20s were spent single-mindedly climbing the corporate ladder at a software development company, saving money with the fierce dedication of someone whose future depended on it. No extravagant vacations, no designer labels, just relentless contributions to my retirement fund and a growing emergency nest egg that eventually swelled into something truly substantial. The first tremor of trouble struck 2 years ago, at Christmas dinner. We were gathered at my parents' familiar table, Bridget, Kyle, their lively brood, my Aunt Dorothy, and her husband, Warren. The conversation, as it often does, drifted to the sky-high housing prices in our area. Bridget casually mentioned their landlord was selling, and they might soon be displaced. The market's impossible right now, Kyle sighed, shaking his head. Everything decent is $400,000 minimum. We'd need at least $80,000 for a down payment, and our credits shot after that medical bill nightmare. It was then my mother's eyes, heavy with unspoken intent, slid across the table to mine. I felt the physical weight of her gaze, a pressure against my chest. Natalie has been doing so well, she purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Haven't you, sweetheart? All that hard work paying off. I should have seen the trap laid bare. Should have recognized the insidious preamble. Instead, I smiled, basking in a fleeting moment of self-satisfaction. I've been fortunate, I admitted, a genuine blush rising. The company gave me a promotion last spring, and I've managed to save quite a bit over the years. That candid admission, made with a sense of honest pride, sealed my fate. Though I was utterly oblivious to it then. 2 months later, the invitation arrived, dinner at their modest ranch house, just the 3 of us. No Bridget, no extended family. My childhood home, once a sanctuary, now felt vaguely ominous. My mother served my favorite pot roast. My father uncorked a bottle of wine he'd been saving. A special occasion, indeed. We have something important to discuss, my dad announced after the meal, pulling a manila folder from behind his chair and setting it with a decisive thud on the table between us. Your mother and I have been thinking about Bridget's situation. Inside, real estate listings, mortgage pre-approval documents, and a meticulously detailed spreadsheet breaking down monthly payments. My stomach plummeted. We found a beautiful house in Crescent Park, my mother chirped, her voice thick with a forced excitement that set my teeth on edge. 4 bedrooms, big backyard for the kids. Excellent school district. It's listed at $350,000. I swallowed hard, choosing my words carefully. That's wonderful. Are you thinking of taking out a loan to help them with the down payment? My parents exchanged that look, the one that made the hair on my arms stand up. Not exactly. My father cleared his throat, his gaze unwavering. We're going to buy the house outright. We've already spoken with Bridget, and she's thrilled. The only issue is the financing. You want to buy it outright? I repeated, utterly baffled. How? You don't have that kind of money. My mother reached across the table, her hand closing over mine, a vice-like grip masquerading as affection. That's where you come in, sweetheart. We know you've been saving. You've done so well for yourself, and you've never had to support anyone but yourself. No husband, no children, no real expenses. Bridget has sacrificed so much to raise those babies. This is your chance to give back to the family. I slowly pulled my hand away, convinced I must have misheard, my mind racing to find any other interpretation. What exactly are you asking me? My father slid the mortgage documents toward me. We'll put the house in our names, with Bridget and Kyle living there. You'll make the mortgage payments until it's paid off. Think of it as an investment in your family's future. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself, trying to process the audacity of their words. You want me to pay $350,000 for a house I'll never own, so Bridget can live there for free? Don't be so dramatic. My mother snapped, her tone suddenly devoid of its earlier warmth, hardening like concrete. It's not like you're doing anything with that money. You're single. You rent a perfectly adequate apartment, and you have no dependents. Meanwhile, your sister is struggling to give your niece and nephews a decent life. Where is your compassion? My compassion? I shot to my feet so fast my chair scraped violently against the floor. I've spent the last 12 years working 60-hour weeks, skipping vacations, driving a 10-year-old car, all so I could build security for my future. Now you want me to hand over everything I've saved because Bridget made different choices? Different choices? My mother's voice rose to match mine, shrill and accusatory. She chose to get married and have children. She chose to contribute to this family instead of hoarding money like some kind of miser. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. All those years of being the reliable daughter, the one who showed up for every family event, who nursed them through sickness, who never asked for anything in return. And now I was a miser, simply for having the audacity to save my own earnings? I'm not paying for Bridget's house, I said, my voice shaking but firm. If you want to help her, that's your business. But my money is my own. I left that night without dessert. My mother's protests, a desperate plea about duty and family loyalty, echoed behind me as I walked to my car, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around. I couldn't look at either of them without feeling utterly sick. The 40-minute drive home unwound through suburban streets I'd known my entire life. I passed the elementary school where Bridget and I learned to read, the park where Dad taught us to ride bikes, the ice cream shop still selling the same butter brickle Mom always ordered. Every landmark felt tainted now, every cherished memory recontextualized through the bitter lens of what had just transpired. When I finally reached my apartment complex, I sat in the parking lot for nearly an hour, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I replayed the conversation, searching for some moment where I had misunderstood, some phrase that could be interpreted differently. There had to be an explanation that didn't involve my parents genuinely believing they were entitled to my life savings. My phone buzzed before I even made it inside. A text from my mother, *, we're disappointed in you, but we still love you. Sleep on it, and call us tomorrow when you've had time to think clearly. *. Think clearly? As if my refusal to hand over $350,000 was some temporary insanity. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled out every financial document I possessed and spread them across my kitchen table. 12 years of careful planning stared back at me, retirement projections, emergency fund calculations, the modest investment portfolio I diligently built since my mid-20s. None of it was extravagant. I wasn't wealthy by any reasonable standard. I was simply prepared, the way any responsible adult should be. My friend Quinn called the next morning, sensing something was wrong when I didn't respond to her usual Saturday memes. I told her everything, my voice cracking repeatedly as I recounted the dinner conversation. When I finished, she was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Your parents asked you to pay off someone else's mortgage, she finally said, her voice laced with incredulity. And they're acting like you're the unreasonable one. They don't see it that way, I explained, the words tasting like ash. They see it as family helping family. Family helping family is bringing casseroles when someone's sick or watching the kids for a weekend, Quinn retorted, her outrage validating what I'd felt but couldn't articulate. Family helping family is not demanding someone empty their bank account so their sibling can have a free house. She was right. This wasn't normal. This wasn't what healthy families did. Something had gone terribly wrong in my parents' thinking. Some insidious entitlement had taken root that I hadn't noticed growing. The following week, I discreetly reached out to older coworkers, people who had navigated complicated family dynamics over decades of adulthood. Their responses varied, but a common, chilling theme emerged: my parents had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The request itself was offensive, but the manner of it, the ambush, the pre-prepared documents, the absolute assumption of my compliance, revealed something deeper and more troubling. They don't see you as a person. Marcus, a senior developer who'd weathered his own family estrangement, told me gravely. They see you as a resource. And that's not going to change just because you said no once. He was tragically correct, as the following weeks would prove. For 3 relentless weeks, my phone exploded. Bridget sent long, agonizing texts about how the kids had already seen pictures of the house, how Mia had picked her bedroom, how Owen wanted a vegetable garden. My mother called daily, a relentless litany of every sacrifice she'd made raising me. My father sent emails, complete with links to articles about the importance of family financial support, as if academic studies could possibly guilt me into emptying my life savings. I stopped responding. My therapist, Dr. Ella Foster, whom I'd started seeing after that ambush dinner in February, became my lifeline during those dark months. Our sessions gave me the invaluable space to process not just the immediate crisis, but the insidious patterns that had led to it. We examined my childhood through a new, unsettling lens, identifying countless moments where my parents had treated my accomplishments as communal family property rather than individual achievements. When you got your first job, Dr. Foster probed during one session, how did your parents react? I thought back to that day, fresh out of college with an entry-level position at a tech startup. They were proud, I recalled, then a dawning realization. But now that I think about it, my mom immediately started talking about how I could help pay for Bridget's wedding. Like my salary was already earmarked for someone else. And did you help pay for the wedding? I gave them $5,000. I'd only been working for 6 months. It was most of what I'd saved. Dr. Foster nodded slowly. So, there's a history here. A pattern of expecting your financial success to benefit others in the family. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. This wasn't a sudden, out-of-character shift in my parents' behavior. It was an escalation, a grand finale to a theme that had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. I had simply never recognized it because the amounts had been smaller, the requests framed more gently. My college fund had been rated to cover Bridget's community college classes when her financial aid evaporated. My high school graduation money had been borrowed to fix the family car, never to be returned. Even as a child, my birthday money went into a family savings account that somehow never materialized into anything specifically for me. I had been trained from birth to see my resources as communal property. The mortgage demand was simply the logical, grotesque conclusion of a lifetime of conditioning. Aunt Dorothy called me one evening, her voice carefully measured. She had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed conflicts. I spoke with your mother, she began hesitantly. She's very upset. I imagine she is, I replied, the bitterness evident in my tone. Natalie, I'm not calling to take sides, but I am worried about where this is heading. Your mother mentioned something about consulting a lawyer. My blood ran cold. A lawyer for what? She didn't say exactly. Something about promises and obligations. I told her she was being ridiculous, but you know how she gets when she's decided something. I thanked Dorothy for the chilling warning and immediately called Patricia Jo, upgrading our relationship from occasional real estate consultant to potential defense attorney. She listened to my summary of the situation with increasing disbelief. Let me make sure I understand, Patricia said, her voice laced with incredulity. Your parents want to sue you because you won't buy your sister a house that you never agreed to buy. That's the gist of it. On what grounds? There's no contract, no written agreement, no consideration exchanged. This would be laughed out of court. Maybe, but they could still file, couldn't they? They could still drag me through the process. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Yes, they could. And depending on how far they're willing to take it, the process itself could be expensive and exhausting, even if you ultimately win. So, what do I do for now? Document everything. Save every text message, every email, every voicemail. If this does go legal, you'll want a clear record showing that you never promised anything. I spent that weekend organizing my communications into folders, printing out text conversations, and writing a detailed timeline of every relevant interaction. The act of documenting felt strange, clinical, almost surreal. These were my parents I was building a case against, the people who had changed my diapers and taught me to drive. But Patricia's advice proved prescient. Then, the letters from the attorney arrived. The first one came in late March. I remember because the trees outside my apartment window were just starting to bud, tiny green shoots pushing through winter's gray grip. The envelope bore the return address of a local law firm, Henderson and Associates. Inside, I found a demand letter accusing me of breach of verbal contract and unjust enrichment. According to my parents' attorney, I had made an oral agreement at Christmas dinner to financially support my sister's housing needs. The letter claimed that my statements about having savings, combined with my alleged promise to help family, constituted a binding contract. They demanded $350,000 to purchase the house in Crescent Park, plus legal fees. I laughed when I finished reading it. Surely this was a joke, a desperate bluff meant to scare me into compliance. No court would enforce such a ridiculous claim. I called Patricia Joe and read her the letter. This is absurd, I insisted. They can't actually sue me for money I never promised them, can they? Patricia was quiet for a moment. They can file anything they want. Whether they'll succeed is another matter. But I have to warn you, Natalie, litigation is expensive and emotionally draining, even when you win. Are you prepared for that? Do I have a choice? 2 weeks later, I was served with a formal complaint. My parents had filed suit against me in civil court, seeking $350,000 plus damages for emotional distress and family alienation. The complaint painted me as a heartless miser who had deliberately dangled false promises of financial support before her struggling sister, then cruelly withdrawn them once the family became dependent on my assistance. Reading their words, I barely recognized myself. According to my parents, I had spent years flaunting my wealth at family gatherings, making Bridget feel inadequate, and engineering a situation where my sister's hopes were raised and then dashed. They even claimed I had caused my niece and nephews psychological harm by promising them a dream home and then snatching it away. None of it was true. I had never promised anything. I had simply answered an innocent question about how my career was going. The emotional toll of those months cannot be overstated. I lost weight. Eating felt impossible when anxiety gnawed constantly at my stomach. My performance at work suffered, drawing concerned questions from my manager that I deflected with vague references to family issues. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by endless nights staring at the ceiling and wondering how my life had fractured so completely. Quinn practically moved into my apartment during the worst of it, showing up with takeout containers and forcing me to eat. She sat with me while I cried, held my hand during phone calls with Patricia, and reminded me daily that I wasn't the villain my parents were trying to make me. You know what kills me? I said one night, halfway through a bottle of wine we probably shouldn't have opened. Bridget and I used to be close. Really close. And now I don't even know if she's part of this, or if she's just watching from the sidelines. Have you tried reaching out to her directly? I shook my head. I'm afraid of what she might say. If she tells me she thinks I owe her the money too, I don't think I could handle it. Or she might tell you she had nothing to do with this. Wouldn't it be better to know? I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. The uncertainty felt safer somehow, preserving the faint possibility that my sister wasn't complicit in my parents' betrayal. My coworker, Lucas, noticed the change in me during a project meeting that spring. Afterward, he pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. I gave him a sanitized version of the story: family conflict, legal threats, estrangement. His face darkened as I spoke. My brother tried something similar with my dad's inheritance, he shared quietly. Claimed verbal promises, family obligations, the whole routine. Cost me 30 grand in legal fees before it was over, and we haven't spoken in 5 years. How do you deal with it? The loss. I mean, he's still your brother. Lucas considered the question carefully. The person I lost isn't the person who sued me. The brother I grew up with wouldn't have done that. Whoever filed those papers was a stranger wearing my brother's face. Once I accepted that, the grief got easier to carry. His words stayed with me through the discovery process, through the depositions, through all the legal machinery grinding forward. The discovery process lasted 8 grueling months. My parents' attorneys subpoenaed my bank records, my tax returns, my employment contracts. They deposed my coworkers, trying to prove that I had bragged about helping my sister. They deposed my friends, searching for evidence that I had spoken negatively about Bridget behind her back. They even tried to depose my therapist, though Patricia successfully fought that on privileged grounds. During my own deposition, my parents sat across the conference table from me, flanked by their attorney. My mother wore the pearl necklace I had given her for her 60th birthday. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Bridget wasn't there. According to Patricia's investigation, she hadn't actually been involved in the decision to sue. My parents had acted on their own, convinced that legal pressure would force me to fall in line. Their attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses named Donald Price, questioned me for 6 relentless hours. He asked about every conversation I'd had with my parents over the past 5 years, trying to construct a narrative of implied promises and financial commitments. He produced text messages where I'd sent my niece birthday money and argued that this established a pattern of financial support for Bridget's family. He pointed to a baby shower gift I'd bought for Theo's birth and suggested it constituted evidence of my intention to provide ongoing assistance. Through it all, I kept my answers short and factual. Patricia had coached me well: no editorializing, no emotional outbursts, just clear denials and requests for the specific evidence behind each accusation. When the deposition ended, my mother tried to physically restrain me in the hallway. "This can still stop," she pleaded, her hand reaching for my arm. "Just do what's right, Natalie. Your sister needs that house. Those children deserve stability. Why are you being so stubborn?" I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had taught me to read and ride a bike and cook my grandmother's spaghetti sauce. I searched her face for some trace of the mother I remembered, the one who had cheered at my college graduation and cried happy tears when I landed my first job. "You're suing me," I said quietly, the words heavy with disbelief. "You're suing your own daughter because I won't give you $350,000, and you're asking me why I'm being stubborn?" She flinched as if I'd struck her. My father appeared at her elbow, steering her away without a word to me. The trial was scheduled for the following spring. As the date approached, Patricia and I prepared our defense. We had strong legal arguments. No written contract existed, no witnesses could corroborate any verbal agreement, and the entire premise of their case rested on a few innocuous comments I'd made at dinner. But Patricia warned me that trials were unpredictable, especially when family dynamics were involved. "Judges are human," she said during one of our preparation sessions. "If your parents can paint you as cold and selfish while they look like heartbroken grandparents trying to provide for their grandchildren, it could affect how the judge weighs the evidence. We need to humanize you, show your side of the relationship." I spent weeks gathering documentation of my contributions to the family over the years: holiday gifts, charitable donations made in family members' names, emergency loans I'd given my parents when their roof needed replacing, loans they never repaid, I might add. I compiled a timeline showing how I'd been a supportive daughter and sister right up until the moment they demanded I surrender my entire savings. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Television had given me visions of grand chambers with towering ceilings and ornate wooden benches. Instead, we filed into a modest room with fluorescent lighting and water-stained ceiling tiles. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Holloway, presided from an elevated platform that didn't quite manage to look impressive. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table with Donald Price. My mother had dressed conservatively, a navy suit that made her look fragile and maternal. My father wore the same tie he'd worn to my high school graduation, and I wondered if that was intentional, a subtle reminder of all the years before this fracture. Bridget sat in the gallery behind them. Kyle was noticeably absent. According to the rumor mill that was my Aunt Dorothy, he had refused to support the lawsuit, and the couple had been fighting constantly since it began. My sister looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes and a tension in her shoulders that suggested she hadn't slept well in months. Donald Price gave his opening statement first. He painted a portrait of a family torn apart by one selfish member's greed. He spoke of Mia Owen and Theo growing up in a cramped apartment, while their wealthy aunt hoarded money she didn't need. He described my parents as simple, hard-working people who had believed in the bonds of family, only to be betrayed by the daughter they had sacrificed everything to raise. Patricia's opening was shorter and more clinical. She outlined the complete lack of evidence for any contract, the unreasonableness of expecting one family member to purchase a home for another, and the emotional manipulation my parents had employed in their attempt to extract money from me. This case is not about family values, she concluded, her voice ringing clear. It's about whether the plaintiffs can force the defendant to pay for a lifestyle the defendant never agreed to finance. The answer, under every applicable legal standard, is no. During a break on the first day, I stepped outside to get some air. The courthouse had a small garden area with benches, mostly empty in the mid-morning chill. I sat down and tried to calm my racing heart, focusing on the bare branches of an oak tree against the gray sky. A woman about my age approached and sat on the opposite end of the bench. She wore a visitor's badge and clutched a manila folder, eerily similar to the ones I'd seen throughout my own legal journey. "Family court?" she asked, nodding toward the building. "Civil," I replied, exhaling slowly. "My parents are suing me." Her eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. Parents suing their own kid? What for? I gave her the abbreviated version. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. And I thought my custody battle was messy. At least my ex and I chose each other at some point. You didn't choose your parents. No, I agreed, a bitter laugh escaping me. I just got assigned to them by birth. She laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Isn't that always the way? We spend our whole lives trying to earn love from people who are supposed to give it freely. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes before a court officer called her inside for her own proceedings. She squeezed my shoulder as she left. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Anyone whose parents would sue them over money, you're better off without them, even if it doesn't feel that way right now." I carried her words back into the courtroom like a talisman. The trial lasted 3 days. My parents' attorney called witnesses who testified about the close relationship our family had once enjoyed. He introduced the Christmas dinner conversation through my mother's testimony, embellishing my comments into something resembling a promise. He even brought in a financial expert who analyzed my net worth and argued that paying the full amount wouldn't cause me significant hardship. On cross-examination, Patricia demolished their case piece by piece. She got my mother to admit that I had never used the words "I promise" or "I agree," or any other phrase indicating commitment. She established that no one at the dinner table had interpreted my comments as a promise at the time. The idea that I owed them money had developed later, after they decided they wanted to buy the house. She questioned the financial expert's assumptions and showed that depleting my savings would devastate my retirement plans and leave me with no emergency cushion. When it came time for our defense, Patricia put me on the stand. I told the court about my career, my meticulous saving habits, and my reasons for wanting financial security. I explained that I had never promised to support my sister's housing costs, that the entire lawsuit had blindsided me, and that my parents' demands had come out of nowhere. Then Donald Price rose for cross-examination. He tried to paint me as selfish and out of touch, asking why I needed such a large emergency fund when I had stable employment. He suggested that my lack of a husband and children meant I had no reason to save for the future. He implied that my refusal to help family revealed a fundamental character flaw. I kept my composure through all of it, answering his questions calmly and refusing to rise to his provocations. The turning point came on the third day when Judge Holloway interrupted Donald Price's closing argument. "Counselor," she said, her voice cutting through his rhetoric about family obligation, "I've listened to 3 days of testimony, and I still haven't heard a satisfactory answer to one basic question." Price paused, his mouth still open, clearly thrown off his rhythm. "Your Honor, why is the defendant obligated to pay for anything?" The courtroom fell silent. Price shuffled his notes, his face reddening. "Your Honor, as we've established through testimony, there was a verbal agreement. A verbal agreement requires offer, acceptance, and consideration." Judge Holloway interrupted, her gaze piercing. "I've heard no evidence of acceptance. The defendant said she had savings. She did not say she would give those savings to her parents. She did not say she would pay for her sister's house. She made no promise whatsoever. Your Honor, the family understanding is not a contract." The judge finished for him, leaning forward, her eyes sharp. "Let me ask you directly, Counselor. In your legal opinion, if I mention at Thanksgiving dinner that I have a nice car, does that obligate me to give that car to my cousin who needs transportation?" "No, Your Honor, but if I tell my brother that my business is doing well, am I legally required to pay off his credit card debt?" "Those situations are different, they're identical," Judge Holloway stated, sitting back in her chair, her authority undeniable. "The plaintiffs are asking this court to establish that a family member's financial success creates an obligation to support less successful relatives. That's not how contract law works. That's not how any law works. I've heard enough." She called for a brief recess before delivering her verdict. I sat at the defense table, my hands shaking, afraid to hope that this nightmare might actually be ending. When we reconvened, Judge Holloway wasted no time. "In the matter of Howard and Catherine Morrison versus Natalie Morrison, I find in favor of the defendant. The plaintiffs have failed to establish the existence of any contract, oral or otherwise. They have failed to demonstrate any legal obligation on the part of the defendant to provide financial support for her sister's housing needs. The claims of breach of contract and unjust enrichment are without merit." My mother let out a small, choked sob. My father sat motionless, staring at the table in front of him. "Furthermore," the judge continued, her voice stern, "I am troubled by the nature of this litigation. The plaintiff sought to use the legal system to compel their daughter to hand over her personal savings based on nothing more than family expectations and wishful thinking. This court will not facilitate such manipulation. She awarded me attorney's fees and costs, a judgment of nearly $40,000 against my parents. Patricia had argued for it aggressively, pointing out that the lawsuit had been frivolous from the start and designed purely to pressure me into settling. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I had aged 10 years in 3 days. Patricia squeezed my shoulder, promising to handle the post-trial paperwork. I pushed through the heavy doors into the spring sunshine, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in over a year. Bridget caught up with me in the parking lot. "Natalie, wait." I turned to face my sister, bracing myself for anger, for accusations. Instead, I found tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know they were going to sue you," she choked out, her voice breaking. "I swear I didn't know. They told me they were just going to talk to you, work something out. When the lawsuit started, I begged them to drop it, but they wouldn't listen." I studied her face, searching for deception. All I found was genuine anguish. "They'd been using me as a pawn," she continued, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Mom keeps telling me I deserve the house because I gave her grandchildren. Like that's some kind of competition. I never asked for any of this. I was fine with our apartment. The kids were fine. Were you ever actually shown the house in Crescent Park? She shook her head. Mom sent me pictures. She said it was already basically decided. I should have questioned it more, but I just... She trailed off, her voice cracking again. I wanted to believe something good was happening. We stood there in the parking lot, two sisters on opposite sides of a chasm our parents had carved between us. I thought about all the holidays we'd shared, all the inside jokes and childhood memories. I thought about Mia and Owen and little Theo, who had done nothing wrong and deserved better than to be caught in this disaster. I don't know how to fix this, I said finally, my own voice raw. Neither do I. Bridget reached out and took my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. But maybe we can figure it out together. Without them. The aftermath of the trial reshaped everything I thought I knew about family. My parents never paid the judgment against them. Patricia eventually placed a lien on their house, which prevented them from selling or refinancing until they settled the debt. We didn't speak. I removed myself from every family group chat, blocked my mother's number after she left a voicemail calling me an ungrateful monster, and started building a new definition of what family meant. Bridget and I began meeting for coffee once a month, then twice a month, then weekly. We talked about our childhood, examining memories through adult eyes and realizing how often our parents had played us against each other. I remembered being 8 years old and crying because Mom said Bridget was her favorite since she was easier to raise. Bridget remembered being 12 and devastated because Dad told her I was the smart one, and she should focus on finding a good husband. They had been manipulating us our entire lives. We realized the lawsuit was just their most blatant attempt yet. Why would they do that? Bridget asked me once, tears welling up. What did they gain from making us distrust each other? I had thought about this question extensively, both in therapy and during my own sleepless nights. Control. I told her, the word tasting bitter. If we were close, we might compare notes. We might realize what they were doing. But if we were always slightly at odds, always seeking their validation over each other's, they stayed at the center of everything. The realization was devastating, but also liberating. Our fractured relationship hadn't been our fault. The distance between us had been engineered by people who should have wanted nothing more than for their daughters to love each other. Kyle warmed to me gradually as well. He had initially viewed me with suspicion, the wealthy sister-in-law who had refused to help when help was needed. But as he learned the full story, the ambush dinner, the legal threats, the manipulation, his perspective shifted entirely. I owe you an apology, he said one evening when I joined them for dinner. I believe what they told me about you. That you promised to help and backed out. That you were punishing Bridget for having kids. They're convincing. I conceded. They've had a lifetime to perfect their approach. Still, I should have asked you directly instead of assuming the worst. We shook hands across the dinner table, a small gesture that meant more than either of us could articulate. My parents remain estranged. I hear updates occasionally through Aunt Dorothy, who has become a neutral party in the family Cold War. Mom tells everyone who will listen that I ruined her relationship with her grandchildren. Dad apparently suffered a minor health scare last winter and blamed the stress of the lawsuit he chose to file, for his condition. Part of me grieves for what we've lost. I mourned deeply in those first months after the trial. Mourned the parents I thought I had. The family I thought we were. Therapy helped me understand that I was grieving a fiction, an idealized version of my family that had never actually existed. The real family, the one built on conditional love and financial manipulation? That family deserved to fall apart. Last month, Bridget texted me a photo of a small house with blue shutters and a wraparound porch. We made an offer, the caption read. Modest, but ours. They had scraped together a down payment through their own savings and a small loan from Kyle's parents. The mortgage would be tight, but manageable. No handouts, no manipulation, no strings attached. I drove over to see it the day they got the keys. Mia gave me a tour of her new bedroom, which was barely bigger than a closet, but had a window overlooking a dogwood tree. Owen showed me the backyard where he planned to build a fort. Theo clung to my leg and asked if I would come to dinner sometime. As often as you want me. I promised him, squeezing his small hand. Bridget found me later, sitting on the front porch steps while the kids explored the empty rooms. Thank you, she said, settling beside me. For what? I didn't pay for any of this. For not letting them win. She leaned her head on my shoulder. If you had given in, I never would have known what we could do on our own. I never would have believed we could actually have something that's ours. They wanted to make me dependent on you, and that would have destroyed both of us. I wrapped my arm around her. The evening sun painted the street in shades of gold and amber. And somewhere in the house behind us, children laughed with pure, uncomplicated joy. I've started volunteering with a financial literacy nonprofit, teaching young adults about saving and boundaries and the importance of protecting yourself, even from people who claim to love you. Every workshop I lead, I see faces that remind me of myself at 22, eager and trusting and completely unprepared for the ways family can hurt you. Nobody is entitled to your money. I tell them, my voice firm. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. Generosity is beautiful when it's freely given. The moment someone demands it from you, it stops being generosity. It becomes control. They nod and take notes and probably think I'm being dramatic. But some of them will remember my words when they need them most. Some of them will have the courage to say no when saying no is the hardest thing in the world. The judge asked one question that day in court, a question so simple and obvious that my parents' entire case crumbled beneath it. Why is the defendant obligated to pay for anything? The answer was clear. I wasn't. I never had been. Family is supposed to be about love, not ledgers. Support, not extortion. When my parents transformed their relationship with me into a financial transaction, they lost the right to call themselves family at all. Now I build my own family, chosen rather than assigned by birth. Bridget and Kyle and the kids. My friends who stood by me through the lawsuit. Patricia, who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Aunt Dorothy and Warren, who refused to take sides but always made sure I knew they cared. This new family is smaller and less traditional, but it's honest. Nobody keeps score. Nobody demands what they haven't earned. Nobody files lawsuits when they don't get their way. Some nights I still dream about Sunday dinners at my parents' house, back when I believed the love was real. I wake up with tears on my face and an ache in my chest that never fully fades. But then morning comes, and with it comes the life I've built, the career I've worked for, the savings I've protected, the relationships I've chosen. The judge asked one question. My parents couldn't answer it, and that failure cost them everything. I answered it in the only way that mattered, by walking away and building my own truth.